All right, thanks everyone for joining for today's webinar on digital transformation within the insurance industry. Couple very quick things up top. One, we are recording. So if for any reason you need to drop early, or maybe if a colleague was unable to join, you will be able to view this later on. Two, we can take questions. I'm not sure if I'll have time to get to them on the air, but if not, we can always follow up later. So as soon as you think of a question, please feel free to go right ahead and put it into the question panel or the chat. And like I said, we'll make sure we get an answer to you at the end regardless. Beyond that, I don't really want to take up too much more time, so I'd like to pass it right over to our moderator for today, Pete Heller. Pete.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We think this is going to be a pretty interesting discussion today. When we were thinking about trying to do a session that really focuses on a particular industry, one of the industries that kind of jumped out at us as one that's facing kind of a really interesting point in time is the insurance industry. So we've kind of crafted a session today that kind of seeks to roll back the covers on kind of the state of the industry, particularly as it pertains to software development, and how that relates to some of the unique challenges and kind of the point in time that we're at in the industry. And as the slide says, it is a period of time that is all about making quick adapting moves, and not just the usual kind of actions that react to different regulatory changes in the market, which is something that is ever present. But now there's also considerable movement and change and transformation happening within the industry writ large, whether you're talking about kind of newer, smaller, emerging organizations, and even changes that are happening within and all around major big carriers too. And so we've gathered a panel here today from CloudBees, from Forrester, and from Aflac to kind of go through some of that stuff. So today you'll hear from Brett Cannon, who's a Senior Manager of IT at Aflac. You will also hear from Jeffery Williams, a Senior Analyst focusing on insurance at Forrester. And you'll also hear from me. I am the Business Consulting Director at CloudBees. And you'll hear from all of us on this really important topic. Okay, so what are we going to do today? First, we'll introduce ourselves in a little bit more detail, so you have a good sense of our background as we go through everything. And then Jeff's going to take you through, kind of his view of the state of play of DevOps and insurance. Followed by that, or following that, we'll have Brett talk about what he's seen in his efforts at Aflac around modernizing and improving DevOps. And then we'll have a panel discussion after we've kind of all had a chance to say our piece, have a little bit of a discussion on kind of what it takes to get started in a DevOps initiative in insurance, how you kind of drive that forward, and what some of the kind of most important steps that everybody feels are kind of important to take at this point in time. And of course, we'll leave some time open for Q&A as well. But why don't we sort of start with introductions before, and we'll get to the polling question here in a second, but actually if you want to go back up to the panelist slide, that's perfect. I'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So Brett, why don't we start with you? You want to introduce yourself to the audience here?
Get off mute. Yes, happy to be here. And very happy to be a part of this. I've been with Aflac now for, well, actually November of last year is when I started. Came in to drive DevOps as a part of a digital transformation that's happening at Aflac. And prior to that, I was part of the conglomerate of HP Enterprises, eventually DXC, and been doing some consulting with DXC around Agile and DevOps and working with major corporations on their efforts to try and get DevOps and Agile practices to be a part of their transformation and where they're trying to go.
Awesome, terrific. Well, thank you again, Brett, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to hear your insights on these topics. So Jeffery Williams, why don't you give a little bit more background to our audience on where you're coming from?
Yeah, definitely, Pete. So yeah, guys, this is Jeff Williams, a senior analyst with Forrester, where I focus on the insurance sector. Pete kind of mentioned that on the offset of his part there. But what I really do within my research agenda is really help help insurers really understand what digital means for their business. And I do that in a few ways. I write research reports that cover a broad variety of topics. Much of it is much more focused on the trends that are shaping the change around us. So you think about customers, think about competition. I write about those topics. I also write about technology and how it can enable carriers to really become more agile and compete in this new environment. And much of this I'll be talking to you guys here shortly about. And that's pretty much what I do at Forrester. I'm hoping that the time that I spend with you guys this afternoon, it will be fruitful, and definitely want to hear your questions, because I think hearing what you guys are challenged with can enable me to craft my research agenda as I think about the issues that their sector is facing ahead. So really thankful to be a part of the call with you, Pete and Brett, because I think it's going to be informative for me, not just in terms of helping or shaping my research agenda, but also seeing what our customers are, like you guys, are thinking about. So Pete, I'll pass it back to you to get things moving.
Awesome, that's great, Jeff. And it's great to hear that this session can be kind of a two-way street too.
Yep.
So I'm Pete Heller. Give you a little bit of a background on kind of my role and what I do at CloudBees. So I manage our business consulting practice worldwide. And our business consulting practice includes kind of traditional value consulting, value engineering, but also a little bit broader set of services that helps organizations understand what the business and economic impacts are of CloudBees solutions specifically, but also just DevOps initiatives and projects more generally. And from a connection to insurance point of view, I've been doing this kind of work in value consulting, value engineering for about 10 years. And CloudBees, I did value consulting and led value consulting in the Americas for Guidewire software. So I have a little bit more of a connection to insurance, a little bit more familiarity with the market than just the average person at a technology company.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we jump into it? And we wanted to kind of start things off with a quick polling question. And so you can kind of see the list here, but we're interested to know, which of these best practices, does your company typically use? So if you want to check all the ones that apply there, we'll leave it up there for a couple of seconds, and then we'll check back in a little bit later for the answers.
Right, polling should be up for everyone to be able to vote.
Perfect.
The options here we have, you can choose from a disruptive, fail-fast mindset, consistency, the power of cloud, centralized DevOps and delivery tooling, architected for scale or growth, emphasis on quality, and automated quality gates and controls. I'm going to leave this up a bit longer. We do have votes coming in still. For anyone who hasn't voted, if you'd like to get some in, you can choose as many as apply to you. Slowing down a little. Close this up pretty soon. All right. All right, Pete and team, I'll share this all with you later, but for now, for everyone, I'm going to give this about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, perfect. So we'll check in on those results after Jeff's presentation, but we'll kick things off with Jeff and give us the view of the world of DevOps and insurance from Forrester's point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Pete, Brett, I'm really glad, like I said earlier, to be on this call. DevOps is really instrumental. It's going to be instrumental in how the sector moves ahead. And so the way I think about this part that I'm going to speak to now is much more about why DevOps in insurance. So really, what are the trends that are shaping up in the market that are enabling, this big need for agility that can be brought about by DevOps. So if we can move the slide forward, I want to go quickly through what I want to cover in the next, say, 10 minutes. So we'll start looking at by talking about the empowered consumer. So I'll share with you guys some of the data that Forrester has collected around the consumer and how their preferences have changed. And so we'll see really why DevOps is going to help there. Then we'll talk a bit about competitive trends in the industry. And when I say competitive trends, I'm speaking much more about the InsurTech space. There's a lot of disruption and opportunity coming out of that movement. And so I'll share some points of view about that. And of course, you'll see how DevOps is the basis for competition for carriers ahead. And then we'll talk a bit about insurance sector priorities. Here, I'll also leverage some of Forrester's research and surveys that we've conducted in the market at the C-suite level. I'll share some of those points of view there as well. And then we'll just close out with a quick slide on DevOps and insurance, which I'll lead over to Brett's part of this discussion. So if we can progress the slide, please. All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I think that for the most part, we know kind of what the transformation or the technology has done to our market. If you think back 20, 30 years ago, the big organizations had the technology, they had the capabilities that gave them all the power. Well, mobility, and a variety of other capabilities have really transformed the way that the consumer engages. They have power through these mobile devices, and that power has really just changed the way that they engage with their service providers. Next slide, please. So the way we think about the consumer from a Forrester perspective, we like to evaluate them across their what we call buying journeys. And that buying journey is essentially 6 steps in terms of how the insured is dealing with the insurer. So it starts with discovery. How do they find the insurance? It ends with engagement. How does the carrier engage with the consumer? And what we've seen in our data and our surveys is that across these various steps, the engagement differs. And like if you think about discovery, exploration, the earlier steps in the process, the customer generally, and this differs by product, obviously, but the customer generally prefers to use digital capabilities. So they're more prone to research insurance online than they are to talk to a person. But as they move throughout this journey, what we see in our data is that the customer actually prefers to talk to agents, particularly like around claims experience, for example. So the point of all of this is to say the customer is diverse. The customer's engagement with the carrier is different, and it really depends on the step. And so digital has a place in all of this, and it's going to enable the carrier to be more effective in how we deliver services to the customer. Next slide, please. And so in these 2 charts, and this is an example of some of the data that we compiled. This is specific to auto insurance. If you look to the chart to the left, we can see that the customer is increasingly using smartphones and computers to really research insurance. That's not surprising. If you look to the chart to the right, we can see that agents still constitute like most of how the customer is applying for insurance. And again, that's not surprising given that customers' preferences are to use technology, use digital to find the coverage, but when they want to buy it, they're generally using agents. And in this case, agents are independent agents, captive agents, or CSRs. But still, the point is here that there's diversity in how the customer is transacting with carriers. Next slide, please. And it's not just about how they're transacting. They also are using different means to engage. So On this slide, we're talking a little bit about some of the emerging capabilities that we're seeing in the market that customers are starting to gravitate to. So you think about video chat, for example. Think about filing claims with your mobile phone camera. Also using your mobile phone as a means for uploading documents for identification. These are all things that we're starting to see in our data as things that customers that they want to see their service providers provide. And of course, insurance generally has been a step behind some other sectors, say like banking and retail in this regard. All right, so next slide. So those are just pretty much the trends that we've seen from the consumer. Again, the message there is simple. The customer has changed, their expectations have evolved, and insurers need to keep pace with some of these, with customer expectations. Now I want to discuss pretty quickly with you guys a bit of the competitive trends that we're seeing in the market that in conjunction with this evolving customer preferences are going to transform or really are transforming how insurers are going to market. So next slide, please. All right, so in this slide, I think about the competitive landscape really in 4 buckets. So the top left quadrant there, the big tech companies. So you think about Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and the BATs are the large tech companies out of China. These companies are really transforming how we think about platforms. They own customer relationships. They have massive swaths of data that they're deploying to really get smart about the customer. They're using these new processes to really target the customer, sell the customer on new types of products. That's a big opportunity for insurers, and if we think about the application of that in insurance. Moving to the right top quadrant, InsurTech. These companies are, the way I think about them, there are really 3 different types. We have what we call the digital insurers. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this company or not, but Lemonade Insurance is one that has had a lot of success in the market recently. Digital insurers like Lemonade are companies that are selling insurance direct to consumers. They're full stack companies in the sense that they're underwriting, they're paying claims, they're doing a variety of different things that are transformative for the space. We also have comparison marketplaces in InsurTech, companies that are really simplifying how the customer finds insurance. So giving consumers an opportunity to price shop, for example, in one spot. It's a new wave of how we think about the marketplace for insurance. And then the last quadrant or category I would say in InsurTech are the enablers, and these are the companies that I really think are interesting in the sense that they're bringing capabilities to the market, like through artificial intelligence, big data analytics, that are really going to shape the future of how insurance companies leverage emerging tech to revitalize or rethink their business processes. So InsurTech is a big area of focus for me at Forrester. There's a lot of energy around that space, and I think it's pluses and minuses to the InsurTech wave for sure. The bottom left quadrant, industry incumbents. Of course, the industry is competitive, particularly for like products like auto and homeowners, where there's a lot of capacity in the market. There's a lot of appetite to write risks, and the types of risks that are written in those types of products are smaller. So it intensifies the competitive pressures. And what we're seeing carriers do in these competitive spaces is really try to differentiate using technology. And then adjacent industries is an area that is interesting because we're seeing companies like Tesla, Porsche, like the auto manufacturers, really starting to leverage their ecosystems to become one-stop shops. So think about Tesla, for example. They're selling cars, they're providing banking solutions to their customers, so the customer can finance the car through Tesla, but they're also providing the customer with insurance. So these are examples of what we're seeing in the market around insurance that are driving the need to be agile and fast to market. Next slide, please. And so basically I talked about the InsurTechs. Again, I really like talking about these companies because they generally aren't, in my mind, disruptive in the sense that they're going to change the sector. They just are bringing new capabilities to the market. So they're enabling, customers to get quotes quicker. They're bringing virtual agents and chatbot, capabilities and functionalities to the customer journey, and they're digitizing claims. They're paying claims fast, which in turn, depending upon the product, obviously, can really elevate CX. Next slide. but the incumbents, they aren't standing on the sidelines. I mean, companies are investing in their own capabilities. One of the things that I do a lot of at Forrester is really help our clients understand like how do their capabilities stack up against competitors. So you think about discovery, exploration. How does your website or your mobile app stack up against, say, InsurTech? So these are areas that the incumbents are really focusing on, really trying to digitize front-end experiences to ensure that the customer can experience insurance seamlessly and on a synchronized basis, regardless of the other touch points that they're using. Next slide. So yeah, so we talked about empowered consumers. It's obvious that their preferences are driving a need for insurers to be agile and quick to market. InsurTechs are bringing in new types of capabilities, which are also driving a need for insurers to be agile and fast to market. So insurance sector priorities is the next area that we'll discuss. Next slide. And so on this slide, I'm just basically showing the top 3 priorities as indicated by C-suite executives that we interviewed in insurance on their 2020 objectives. They said that they were really focused on growing revenue. Of course, growing revenue includes expanding into new markets, offering new products. Mergers, acquisitions can be a part of that, but technology factors into helping them drive revenue through cross-selling to customers that they currently have, and really just using technology to know the customer better. Improving CX is an obvious one. I think that companies have increasingly become more focused on helping customers find a product, but also just using technology to know the customer better and make sure that the steps that the customer is taking to get from the buy, servicing and even, I guess, discovery steps in their buying journey are easier and less stressing on the customer. And then the last point there, improve ability to innovate. This is where technology is really going to help, right? I mean, I think DevOps factors very heavily here because it's enabling the industry to really rethink a lot of the business processes, application development, things of that nature that are going to really enable the sector to keep pace with the change around it. Next slide. So really it gets down to this one last final point: why DevOps in insurance? Next slide, please. And this is just a quick slide that I built up. It's showing the road there and the lights really flashing. It's an opportunity for the sector. I mean, DevOps is a means to creating competitive advantages. Technology is going to be a way that carriers create those advantages. And I'm interested to hear Brett's conversation coming up here, because Brett, you guys are actually implementing a lot of the thinking around DevOps that is helping to bring success to Aflac. So I want to pass it to you just so you can start on that part of this discussion. I've set the stage as to what's happening in the market. Now Brett's going to bring a little bit more of the what someone in the market is actually doing to create success with DevOps. All right, so I'm done, Pete. I'm going to pass it over to you, I guess, or is it going to Brett first?
Yeah, I'll take the baton here real briefly. Thanks for that. That was a really good overview, sort of the state of play, and sort of provides all the context for. So why is it that there's ever increasing desire to be able to move faster, more nimbly, and so on. And I think you hinted at basically all of it there. Max, I wanted to show the results from the first question first, if we could, and then we can move on to the second point question.
So ironically, I've already opened the second question, but I will follow up with there were 3 real winners on the last one. I'll follow up with on that shortly.
No, you're teasing us
for this one. That's right. So for this one so far, a bit more time. You can choose from more than previous years, less than previous years, or about the same. The votes are coming in. I'm going to give it a little bit more time. Let's call it maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And this one don't even have to show. It's 100% of more than previous years.
Oh, that's
And the previous one, we're really looking at the power of cloud, centralized DevOps and delivery tooling, and automated quality gates and controls as the clear winners.
All right. All right. That's great. So that, I think, understanding, first of all, that all of those pressures that Jeff talked about are indeed being felt by everybody on the ground, and also understanding kind of what some of the different big priorities are in terms of executing on the technical side. From that first question is a perfect segue to hear what one carrier is doing in terms of putting some of these technical components into place. So Brett, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can give us just a quick update on the state of DevOps at Aflac and kind of the things you're doing, to meet these pressures that keep coming.
Okay. So you can go to the next, there you go. So just before I go into what I've got on the slide here, it's interesting. I'd not seen Jeff's slides prior to this, but I can firmly say that a lot of the things, Jeff, you talked about are things that we're facing, and some other things that maybe you didn't necessarily talk about, but I heard a lot of things that I hear inside our company and the things that we're trying to do to be disruptive, to get ahead of the curve, to be the ones out in front, kind of setting the standards of where it is that we're trying to go in the sector of insurance that we play in. We would definitely want to be a disruptor in what it is that we're doing and lead. And so when I came into Aflac, as I mentioned before, I've only been here since November, and there was a big digital transformation journey that had been started. But there were a lot of things that in many cases, the company had kind of plateaued in that as it relates to DevOps and agile principles. And so I'll just kind of touch on those for just a little bit about what it is we're doing and kind of where we're going now, as opposed to where we were when I came into the company. But just a little bit of company highlights. I feel extremely privileged to be a part of Aflac. I knew it was a good company, but now that I'm in the company and a part of the culture and whatnot, I do absolutely feel it is a privilege to be here, to be a part of this journey that Aflac is on. Fortune 500 company. I didn't know until I got into it, right, that we insure 50 million people, and a lot of that actually happens in Japan. We're a big player in the US for supplemental insurance, but we're a big player in Japan. In fact, 1 in 4 households in one way or another are part of Aflac, or Aflac is a part of their lives and what it is that we do in the medical and cancer insurance business in Japan. So we're a big player there, and then here in the US. And then the other couple of things that really make me proud to be a part of what's going on and share in the culture is that we are recognized in the top 100 best companies to work for by Fortune magazine, 20 years consecutively that we've been a part of that. And now 20 years as being recognized as one of the 100 best places to work in IT. We actually ended up, the results just came out a couple of weeks ago, and we're number 17 on that list. So we're not just a part of, 100 best, we're number 17 on the list. And it is truly a privilege, I think, to be a part of what's going on and the ethical way in which we do our business. Again, the only insurance company, 14 consecutive years to be a part of the most ethical companies in the US to be a part of what's going on, to me is, again, it's just a privilege. I'm very happy to be a part of Aflac. And as I was part of a consulting group before, I did a lot of consulting with companies that wanted to take DevOps and Agile principles and practices and incorporate that into their digital journey. And now I get the opportunity to come in and actually do some of the work that I've been consulting in. And so as I came into Aflac, the state of affairs, if you will, when I first walked in, was they did have a pretty good set of agile practices at the team level and a pretty good set of tools that they were using to further advance the things that the agile teams were doing. We had to have a number of CI/CD pipelines in place, and tools was the major focus around where we were at the point that I walked in. However, my consulting experience would say that is kind of the wrong way to go about it if we truly want to influence what's going on and truly be able to deliver better, faster, more secure, less risk business value. We really need to take this pyramid, if you will, and drive further down into the mindset and culture of what it is that we're trying to accomplish by using DevOps and Agile principles and practices. Once we got that mindset and culture in place and really have a good foundation on where we're trying to go and build around the ways in which we want to use Agile and DevOps, then what are the principles that DevOps can bring to the organization? How do we build around those things? And a lot of you have read the books that are out there, you know, Gene Kim and Jez Humble and some of those that are out there, the DevOps handbook. You'll recognize a lot of the things that we've put into place around the principles and practices of DevOps. And then what are the patterns and the things that we really want to put into place, understanding the mindset, the culture, the principles we're trying to adopt and drive to. Then the patterns and practice come into play, and we're doing it at the value stream level. One of the things that I have learned sometimes from sad experience is DevOps is not Big Bang. In just about every case that I've been a part of, a company that comes in and says we're doing this today and tomorrow we are DevOps, really never go in the direction of becoming DevOps. And so we're applying it at the value stream level. We're taking it a chunk at a time. We're really at the value stream level, understanding what are those principles as it applies to the value stream, what are the patterns and practices that they need to improve at the value stream level, and how do they deliver faster, better, smoother, higher quality solutions to that portion of the business. Then we come in and say, okay, what tools are necessary to be able to deliver those things that we've set up as our foundation for this value stream? We put data in place. We start to track where it is we're trying to go. How do we do faster delivery? How do we lower our impact of change into the environment? How do we recover quickly if we do have something that goes on in the environment? And drive our decisions and drive where we're going based on the data associated with organization and at the team level and what the business values are, the business drivers actually are for that particular value stream. So that is where we're going now. We've kicked this off, we're off and running. If I could say just one other thing, because I think it is very relevant to what it is we're doing today. We had a strategy in place. We had a kind of kickoff where we're going, and we were off and ready to run in kind of a face-to-face type of a mode. That's the culture that Aflac has, and COVID hit. And all of a sudden we had to take a step back and say, we're not sure how long this is going to be in place. Turns out it's a whole lot longer than we even anticipated back in, say, February, March, when we were at that point. And so we stepped back and said, how can we figure out a way to still deliver the strategy and accomplish the goals, but do it from a virtual standpoint? Aflac is very conservative. We're not going back into the office until at least January. Who knows if it goes longer than that, but we're in this mode of being able to, having to deliver a DevOps strategy that was planned to be face-to-face, but now is all virtual. So we're learning in that. We kicked it off, we're doing it now, and we're having some success kind of figuring out and learning as we go. But that's another big piece that we have kind of put into place. I think we're going to be stronger and better for it, because now we do have capability to be either face-to-face or virtual. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're still able to deliver and execute on our strategy. So that's a little bit. Certainly there's more questions and a lot more depth into that, but maybe I took a little longer, Pete, than you wanted, but that's a little bit on the state of DevOps and where we are now in terms of what's happening at Aflac.
No, Brett, that is great. And you, in my view, you can take all the time.
Definitely.
That was great and so now we want to go right into our panel discussion, and actually, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, just some different areas, you know, how you kick these kinds of initiatives off in organizations like these. You know, how everything can get aligned between these technical projects and business. Talk a little bit about, you know, the particular kind of governance, regulatory stuff that's particular to insurance. And I know our time's limited, but I want to key off of something, Brett, that you were just saying about how, as you got your initiative rolling, that's pretty much when COVID hit, and it made me, your story made me want to ask Jeff. We got a really good overview of kind of what all is happening and the broader dynamics in the industry. I'm curious how COVID's affected, some of that, and has it particularly heightened, certain principles and priorities that you went over, or has it diminished any? What have been the big changes, the big ripples that have been felt?
It's a great question, Pete. I mean, it's one of the things that we've done a lot of this year post, I guess really like March 1st is when things really started to be disruptive, I think, in the States, is try to really get a sense of what it means for the customer, but then also keep our eyes on just what it means for the industry. So the customer is one place where we really invested a lot of time in surveying the customer, try to get a sense of how their behaviors have changed. And of course, what we've seen is with all the sheltering in place, there's been a growing comfort with just transacting digitally. And I think that's to be expected, right? Because, I think we're all in a new normal now where people have become more accustomed to this way of thinking. And to your points, Brett, it does seem that much of the industry is taking a much more of a conservative stance. And we're seeing that in the data that we're collecting on our customers too, that they just aren't necessarily ready to get back into, say, like pre-COVID mindset today. So we expect this to continue, and it does accelerate the need to have capabilities that enable the customer to experience you digitally, really. And even agents, if you think about the way that the insurance space is set up, a big part of the distribution strategies for a lot of these carriers they're distributing through agents that were not prepared for this. They don't have the investments in technology, and they're going through a lot of the challenges that we're seeing for a variety of small businesses out there in the world. So it's accelerated the need for insurers to really invest in these capabilities, not just for the customer, but to help their agents too. And that's just that side of the equation. The InsurTech side is the area that I'm also taking a glance at to see if there's a change in how investors are thinking about InsurTech. And what we've seen in the data through second quarter is there's a big shift in terms of how investors are thinking about like the disruptors. And we're seeing a lot of investment in the enablers. So I talked about artificial intelligence type providers in the market. We're seeing a lot of investments there. There are a lot of investments going into agency technology, agency platforms that are going to simplify how agents sell to customers. So we're seeing that be born into a different way that companies and investors are investing in InsurTech. So I'll stop there and just see if that answers the question that you had set out.
Yeah, it definitely does. I do, but I want to follow up on one point though.
Yeah.
Do you see any of these changes benefiting larger incumbents versus InsurTech, or vice versa? Which so obviously this has been a pretty disruptive event.
Yeah.
Do those disruptions blow the winds one direction stronger than the other?
I'm still, if I had to pick a side, I'm on the incumbent side. I just have never really bought into the InsurTech allure. I mean, I get it. These companies are like Lemonade. They're bringing a lot of very interesting capabilities to market, but I do feel that their market is very small. It's like Aflac. I mean, Brett just showed us a lot of different rankings and I guess accolades that the company has received. One that I didn't know about was that they're 17th best in IT, right? I mean, I didn't know that, but I still think the incumbents benefit from obviously large capital bases. They have the balance sheets, but they also have product depth. They have customer relationships. They have market knowledge. They have so many different, I guess, competitive advantages relative to the InsurTechs that I really think they're going to benefit out of this. It's really just about accelerating in the right places. I mean, you can't accelerate across the enterprise, right? Just because what we're going through, you have to be calculating and make the right investments. But I still think that all the other variables around the incumbents, just position them to benefit coming out of COVID whenever we do get through this.
That's
Pete, I can talk a little bit about what's happened to us in that same vein.
Yeah, excellent.
And the need to be agile and the need to take, DevOps practices and principles and be able to pivot quickly. So not only did we as a company go home, but a lot of the agents and brokers and the people that we depend on for our sales also were driven home, or certainly they couldn't go out and be face to face. That's starting to change. It's starting to open back up a little bit, but it caused us to go do some things that we feel we're going to be better for it. In other words, some of the mobile technology, digital technology, and the ability for agents and brokers to sell our services were things that we had on the backlog of items that needed to be done. But all of a sudden, they just jumped right to the top. We needed a different way to sell, a different way to retain, a different way to make sure that our policyholders could submit claims, and all being at home than what that were now. They're different now than what they were before COVID hit. So it's driving the winds, like you're talking about, is driving things forward, maybe in a faster and I think better way than they were before COVID, because now we have to respond to something that we knew we needed to get to, but we're slower on the draw than perhaps we should have been. And now all of a sudden it is exploding in terms of our capabilities.
So that's really, really interesting. And actually it segues really nicely into the next question I wanted to ask you, Brett. And that was, so, you talked about showing up at Aflac and kind of reorienting the priorities, first to kind of build a foundation around people and culture, and building that up through principles and patterns and practices, and eventually reaching tools. And what I'm curious about is, so as you did that, and then COVID hits, how did you then kind of think about, all right, what area of the business or what kinds of tools or capabilities, that you wanted to release into the wild, release to customers? Were there particular areas of the business or particular kinds of tools or capabilities that you said we need now to kind of apply the DevOps machine that we're building, to those first?
So I think in my mind, where I go with that, Pete, is there's a set of tools and capabilities that are used to deliver CI/CD pipelines and DevOps, do automation things faster. How do we, do things in such a way that security is a part of it, and all those types of things. There's a set of tools associated with DevOps. Then there's the set of tools that the business uses to conduct business. Where my focus has been is what tools do we need to help enable DevOps be faster, better, so that the business gets better value from the features that we're delivering, the products that we sell. So I'm not so much focused directly around the tools that the business uses to sell, retain, et cetera, that the agents use and the policy holders use and that kind of stuff. But what we are doing is we have kind of shifted. Remember, I said in the beginning, DevOps does not work big bang. We have to go at it value stream by value stream, or if you will, eat the elephant one bite at a time. We had chosen our first out of the gate value streams that we were going to focus on. And while those haven't changed, the things that those teams are delivering and the features that they are developing have changed. So our ability to deliver business value and the things that we would use as kind of measuring sticks to improve or increase the value that we're delivering now have changed.
Right.
Because we need to focus differently around the set of tools that they're developing for the business. And therefore we need to change how we go about and what the value stream looks like from current to future and where that future needs to go. That's what's changed.
Interesting. So then, as you kind of move from value stream to value stream, how do you know when you've started one particular value stream, how do you know that you've, achieved success with that one and you're kind of ready to move on to the next one?
So we do have a set of criteria, if you will, that says this is where we're starting. So value stream mapping is kind of the first thing out of the gate. And then we go through that and set up a continuous improvement backlog and teach the team how to work and deliver across a value stream rather than just a dev team or a test team or a siloed team, if you will. How do we teach them to work as a value stream team and deliver things and be accountable for things flowing through that value stream as a team? That's one of the principles that we're incorporating, and that is a success principle for us. The other thing I mentioned is there's a set of metrics, and we all know them in the large scale, the DORA metrics that are out there, MTTR and cycle time and impact to change, those types of things. We're measuring those as we go forward in the value stream as kind of the baseline metrics and data that we'll use, but then we'll pick up data pertinent to that value stream as we go. And our success criteria says we've got something in place to measure those metrics. We've taught the team how to operate as a team. We work with them in their first 3, 4, 5 sprints through what we call the Kaizen model of now continuous improvement. And how do we start to take the backlog that we've built with them and put that into their feature backlog. So now they're delivering both features and continuous improvement in the same sprint, the same operating cycle that they have. Once that's in place, then we move on to the next.
Okay.
The other thing that I think is important for us to recognize is we've got an innovation council, which simply is our CIO and his staff, that says these are the in-process value streams that we're working with now. We can kind of pull one out because of the disruption of what's going on and put a new one in, but we have our list. They'll move into done once we've fit or satisfied that criteria that I mentioned, but then the Innovation Council is set up to say, okay, these are the next set of 4 or 5 that we're going to go after, and they move into the in-process Kanban list, if you will, of what we're trying to accomplish. So the Innovation Council, in my mind, is extremely important in making work visible to them and helping them understand how, as a leader, do they operate, how do they be DevOps? They can't just say, okay, you promised me 50 features by November, and I get to October and you've only delivered me 20. What happened to my other 30? Am I going to get my other 30 by the end of November, the commitment? Going from that type of a leadership role to what is that value stream focused on that's going to improve what's happening and how I can deliver better, faster business value, and helping them remove the roadblocks, automate, put things in place so that the value stream is delivering. From a leadership standpoint, to me, that is just as important as getting the team operating in a Kaizen model and having a continuous improvement backlog. Those two things need to marry together. Back to the mindset and culture, it's both at the leadership level and at the team level. And how do we marry those two things together? So we do have that Innovation Council leadership focus, where we're going, and making work visible to them as well as to the team itself.
That is super interesting. And actually, again, like you guys keep setting this up perfectly for the next question I had in mind. And actually, if we can move to the next topic on alignment. So Jeff, so what Brett just talked about in a lot of respects was sort of about how the business is kind of seeking to work with IT, and sort of how the prioritization of activities and so forth kind of ends up flowing through in a really practical way into is prioritizing, what they're doing. So I'm curious, if you could, if you've got a view on, how carriers and InsurTech companies are, how the relationship between the business and IT, has changed in the recent past. And if there are any kind of particular best practices that have emerged out of any of that.
That's really not an area that I have invested a lot of time in, Pete. The way that I think about it is when I think about technology and how it enables like the way that the carrier is dealing with the customer. I think about it in terms of really like what are the enabling capabilities that the customer wants to see. So one of the things that we try to do a lot of at Forrester is really offer that point of view to the industry is, these are the things that your customer wants to see. These are the steps that you can take to get there. One of the things that Brett talked about was before COVID, a lot of carriers weren't really elevating investments in their carrier networks. And that is an area that I'm focusing on intently. I have a lot of research that I'm presently in the process of writing. I'll be publishing in August, where I'm really helping the our carrier clients think about how do you build capabilities at the agent level. And so when I think about technology and the way that it relates to my writing and the advice that I give to clients is really about how do we take technology and look for the right capabilities within that technology to enable our customer or the customer to experience the insurer the way that the customer wants to really experience it. I don't really have a view internally. Like I couldn't really give you any perspective on how internal teams in IT or within an insurance carrier have changed and how that relationship has changed in a COVID environment. But maybe Brett, maybe that's probably a question that you probably have a bit more familiarity with. I'm wondering, do you have any points of view that you could offer on that question?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we've done, and again, from my consulting experience, can say this is, I think, the way to do it. And if you don't do it this way, you're going to have all sorts of problems. We started with the CIO and his staff, leadership within IT, but then we armed him with what are the things that you can go talk to the business about. So at the leadership level, they're aligned. What are the things that we're going to do? One of the things that we asked them to do was to help us go and apply 20% of a value stream team's time on continuous improvement. That means they're going to deliver less features in the beginning. Capacity starts to diminish at the very beginning. Eventually we get to be faster and we're able to deliver more because our value stream is optimized and able to push things more through the system. But we got to go have the conversation with the business around what does that mean? And what do we mean when we're going to say for a sprint or 2 or 3, deliver less features so we can move faster down the road? How does that work? And what does that mean? Let's go have the CIO and the business leaders have that conversation. So we set that up. That conversation has happened. But then on the other side, when we get down to the value stream mapping and the value stream work itself, we are absolutely adamant that the business needs to be part of that. We have product owners that sit in the business that talk about the features that they feel that need to go through the software development lifecycle. When we do the value stream mapping, the business is part of it. They are as much a part of the team as anyone else that's a part of the value stream itself. So we start there and we ask the business, what are the things you're most concerned about? Is it higher quality? Is it faster speed? Is it whatever it is? What are you most worried about? So we use that to flavor where it is that we go in the future. So we've done both. Again, back to leadership and how do we get them to think, behave differently? And then at the team level, how do we make sure that the value stream contains the business and we're not just IT going off and doing our thing and then hope the business comes along?
That's
Brett, I was going to add to that too. So even like hearing Brett's articulated that way, like that's kind of what my research does. It's more indirect though. Like I'm not really like studying like the internal workings of the organization to see like how that relationship between IT and the business is like changing or evolving. But what I do write about is like the need to have business and IT at the table. And so through technology, like a lot of the research that I'm writing now, I'm looking at, say, vendors that are bringing solutions to market that enable IT to do that more effectively with business. So like the applications are more configurable to meet the needs of business, to make business much more swift and adept at getting the right capabilities to the market to meet the needs of that particular carrier's customer. So I'm more, my research is definitely in the same vein, like thinking about those relationships between business and IT as what Brett articulated. It's just that it's much more topical where I'm looking at the external landscape of solutions vendors out there in the market and how they're enabling the change to happen in the insurance space.
cool. That makes complete sense. I know there were a couple other topics that I thought we might touch on, but we are coming up on the end of our scheduled time, and I want to make sure that we get to some Q&A. And kind of one of the questions that's come through a little, just a theme, is just around threats. So we talked a little about COVID. I think that probably kicked off, that line of thinking. So Jeff, maybe you can talk in general, and then Brett will toss to you to talk specifically about Aflac. But Jeff, like, kind of what threats are carriers prioritizing these days?
It's a lot of it deals with just migration to the cloud. I mean, I think it's not necessarily a threat, but it's one of those things that, I think carriers are thinking about, like the data security. You look at, I talked a lot about like using data to know the customer better, but who owns that data? How do you protect that data? There's like a lot of things that I think are going to happen in this space that's going to lead to insurers being a much more personalized product for customers. But we need to get through some of these issues like around cyber, big data, like how do we protect data privacy? A lot of these things that we're seeing very prevalent and prominent in the market and in media are going to affect the sector. And it's not just those more micro-based threats. It's also the macro. When you think about the economy, there's a lot of like geopolitical things that are happening around us today that also pose tremendous risk. So, there are a variety of threats out there, micro and micro, but those are the ones that I'm thinking about as I'm articulating that now. Brett, I mean, curious to get your thoughts on that, the biggest threats that you guys are seeing at Aflac.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see some of the same things you just talked about. And I think some of those threats that you mentioned around data and privacy and all that kind of stuff come into play, especially when you talk about medical issues and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It drives the companies, us in particular, to be extremely conservative and make sure it takes a long time to get things into new software in, as an example, because we want to make sure we don't expose things that we shouldn't, right? So a lot of that stuff is certainly there. But to me, one big threat that is not just, pertinent to the insurance business, but it is now, is how do we retain our customers? How do we get them, sell, but then once we got them, how do we retain them? And we are finding that the retention is lower than we want it to be. And it drives a lot of the things that we're trying to do. So how do we increase our sales? And once we got them, how do we retain them? And how do we improve those overall metrics of the latency, or sorry, the retention that we have? It's interesting. We talk about Aflac being so big in Japan, but our sales are actually bigger in the US, but our retention is a lot smaller. Therefore, our overall revenue is less in the US than Japan, because we retain a whole lot more in Japan than we do in the US. So that's one of the big threats. And there's constant, competitors coming in trying to steal your business and move them over to wherever it is that they're doing. That's a constant threat that we're striving to always do better in, always. Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense, and that is something that I heard in my time at Guidewire. I heard that all the time. That one of the biggest, if not the biggest, metric that the business is looking at all the time is customer retention. That is, that is a big one. Right. And I guess it's appropriate that as we run out of time here, we close on a big note like that. So Brett and Jeff, I really appreciate all the time that you've spent with us here, all the insights that you've given. I know I've come away with a couple of new ideas. I hope our audience did as well. So Max, I don't know if you have any closing remarks or closing logistics before we sign off.
Nope, just thank you everyone for joining. Thanks to all of you for presenting, and that's about it for today. So Pete, if you do have any final remarks, go for it.
No, just once again, I just want to thank everybody for their time, Brett, Jeff, and all the audience. We appreciate your engagement with the polling questions and the Q&A that you sent. We appreciate the time that you spent here with CloudBees and with Aflac and with Forrester.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete.
Absolutely. Thanks again, guys.
Take care.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.